Hi, I'm Kari, and I'm host of the Yukon Entrepreneur Podcast series, which was a series all about how Yukon businesses were adapting during the COVID-19 pandemic. The podcast series actually started on April 2nd, 2020, so just days after the Yukon had declared a state of emergency. And we recorded 34 episodes in that 34 interviews in that first part of it. And it was really amazing when the COVID-19 research recovery grants came out that we were then able to take all of that data, put it into a research project, and then record a second season. And so that's when we became the COVID-19 Yukon Entrepreneur Podcast Insights on Community Innovation, Financial Support, and Communications. And so this became our incredible research team. My name is Kari, and I'm the principal investigator in that role. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Christy Huey, who's a student at Yukon University. We also brought in Mark Anderchuk, who lives in Guelph, as well as Felix Arnaud, who's an advisor in the Faculty of Business at University of Guelph, and his research student researcher Yaman, as well as Sonia Weish out of the University of Ottawa, and and there's a typo there. That's Rodney, as many of you guys know, definitely. Like, oh, Rodney, you really changed. Anyway, that's Rodney. What was really unique, sorry, next slide. But don't play the video yet. What was really unique about this project is that everything was done in real time. So we did the interview, I would do the interview, and then we would immediately publish it to YouTube and podcast feeds with the interviewee's consent. So they would receive a copy of the interview before it went live, and then they would consent, and then it would go live. And so people were able to follow along in real time. And we also get to hear directly from the interviewees themselves, which makes it a really interesting time capsule. We've also published a report, which is available online, and as well, we've consolidated all the interviews into a documentary that runs about 45 minutes long, so you can kind of get sort of like some of the top sort of insights from that as well. So fingers crossed, all the videos work today as we sort of go through this, and I'll just ask the team to press play so we can see all of the wonderful faces.
I think the first memory is really these strange news reports from China out of Wuhan, which all of a sudden we knew there was a city called Wuhan. But I think, where it became apparent that this is a big deal is probably my wife was running a restaurant at the time here in Whitehorse, and March 17th, I believe. So it was right after the weekend where everything changed, but restaurants were still allowed to be open. And March 17th was the last day that she was open. And what she described that night to be like at the restaurant was absolutely heartbreaking and extraordinary. People basically came to eat to support the business. It wasn't so much about going out and having a good time. There were all kinds of takeout orders. People were ordering, but they were really like, nobody wanted to touch anything all of a sudden. Like it was just this, people really well, but this level of trust just was gone all of a sudden. So I think that's probably, that's really the moment where, notwithstanding the cancellation of the Arctic Winter Games, that was sort of the newsworthy moment of the prior week. But that really is the indelible moment for me, where you're realizing how big a deal this is going to be.
There were 2 seasons. The first season had 33 interviews, and season 2 had 24 interviews, and there were a total of 40 interviewees. So some of the interviewees did an episode in season 1 and season 2. And what I love about this project is that I think it's really relevant data for us today, but I also think it's forming a really lovely time capsule for researchers to look at 20 years from now, because it'll all be firsthand knowledge and information that really progresses as the pandemic goes along. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Christy.
I have a really loud voice, so hopefully this is good. I'm going to stand back a little bit. So really what we found, I came in at the beginning of season 2 as part of kind of the research project piece of it. I also got to be a part of the posting of that season 2, and I got to learn new skills like putting things on YouTube, which I'd never done before, which was really fun. But what we got out of it was we kind of found 6 central themes that carried through both seasons. And even though those themes carried through, we discovered from season 1 to season 2 that how entrepreneurs were approaching their business really shifted. So how they were adapting, how they were approaching the pandemic. Season 1 truly was that reactionary period. They were putting out fires. They were really just focused on day to day. How do I stay afloat or like not drown? And then season 2, even though both seasons still had that high amount of uncertainty, season 2 really started shifting towards that like concentration on long-term planning. How am I going to make my business sustainable? What am I going to do if this happens again? How do I get out of this? So we really started seeing that collaboration and adaptation to the new normal and beyond. Get you to move. Oh wait, go back one. Sorry. So out of that, we had the 6 central themes, but we got 4 key insights that we wanted to share with you folks today. Number 1 was really that value of community. So between customer base, but also between the business owners themselves. There was a huge community that developed not only through this podcast series, but you could see it happening in the interviews between like how they were collaborating with one another. Second one was the support for and the ability to efficiently learn about and integrate new business practices. So we really saw that this was a time where entrepreneurs were really actually taking a lot of risks and finding new ways to do things because they were forced to, but also because they started kind of looking long-term, what is going to work in this new normal. And then 3, we had that financial supports from federal and territorial governments to maintain cash flow during lockdown were actually paramount. There were some obviously anomalies that we found in the research and kind of similar to what we were talking about trappers and other pieces. There maybe some people didn't qualify for certain things, but overall the message was that those were necessary. And then the last one was that clear, relatable, logical, and timely communication and support to implement health and safety measures was also something that was dire and really needed, and also moving forward what they would like to see. Next slide. So instead of us talking and putting words into people's mouths, we wanted to share some videos that really cement what we found. So we're going to kind of show you some clips here on each of those key findings.
I just kind of started to evaluate with clients and building relationships with people. So I wanted to figure out how can I maintain and build those relationships without being able to see them. in my service settings. So I started doing a lot of presentations online, connecting with the customers online. It was really well received, so it just kind of grew from there.
Awesome. So that was Amanda Partridge. She was the owner of Elements Hair Studio. I don't know if you can see that small font. So, and then here we have is Marilyn Jones and, oh, Jensen, sorry. I can't even see their business. I know that they're consultants, but I'm sorry, I can't. Let's see if we can see. Social Innovation Consulting.
One of the things that's really important is partnership and collaboration. You know, as you're stronger with more, I think. And you know, say for an example, if you and I decided we wanted to collab on something, and but I didn't know how to do something, but you did, and vice versa. You know, we become stronger as a team, and we're more open, you know, to be able to adjust and do more things. You know, so as I think partnership is a huge strength and benefit, you know, in people who are starting off. Like you're never completely alone. There's always somebody that can help you, and there's always somebody that you can help as well.
A pandemic is a good time to similarly recessions. If you can make your business work in the middle of a pandemic or in a recession, then your business is probably going to do really well outside of a recession or a pandemic. So go for it. Do it. And find people who can ask you the questions that you're not even thinking to ask, like a business counselor.
All right, there we go. Now we got Miles Hogan, and that's with Yukon Build.
When something like this happens, when you have to be so laser focused to continue your staying on the right path to stay sustainable, because there's a lot of businesses that won't necessarily make it through. So it's just sort of always continuing to reevaluate sort of our processes and how we're approaching different things and making sure we are part of the community in a way that helps us to continue and helps us to sustain is going to continue to be important. With COVID or pandemic, whether that continues to be or not, I think that's really important, is sort of taking the things we've learned in the last few months and continue to implement those sort of in a very focused way.
When you consider what we had to go through here in the Yukon, and also, I mean, a lot of the programs that we had from the Department of Economic Development, and some of the supports that they had. I mean, they're one of the first programs they had was the $30,000 a month, up to $30,000 a month grants for basic operating expenses, rents, and things like that if you were shut down. Then they introduced 14-day paid sick leave for any staff that were sick that didn't have any sick days left. I mean, these were great programs, and I realize, like, for some folks, that's it helps. It's not enough, and I mean, certainly recognize that. But when you look in some of the other jurisdictions, they don't have that level of support. So between that and also, again, between having a bit of an insulated economy, that I think we fared a lot better than anyone else.
Stratter, and she's an artist and represents wild Yukon furs. One that I felt the biggest financial impact was the state of emergency that was called in November. was terrible timing in retail. We generate the bulk of our revenue, comfortably 50% of our revenue in the last 2 months of the year. And when that state of emergency was called, I think even though not a lot changed in how we conducted ourselves, I think the assumption that it meant that we were in for the real deal and the gravity of what it spoke to, I think really frightened people. And for me, I saw a massive drop in revenue for November, and so that was disheartening, to have. We joked that there was tumbleweeds rolling down the hall of the mall because nobody was around, and that's really scary when you rely on those last 2 months of the year to get you through the next 3, 4, 6 months of the coming year. So that was one of the biggest things that we experienced as far as like really dramatic impacts. But social fatigue is something that that we're all still dealing with. We still have to sanitize. We still have to wear masks. And I don't like having to police adults. I don't like having to say, please put your mask on, please sanitize, please put your mask on, please sanitize. We're very tired. Just like everyone else, there was a ton of information that came out of the series. There's amazing interviews that are available. We've made it super accessible, but you can listen to it in multiple places as a podcast. We have the videos on YouTube under Yukon Entrepreneurial Podcast. And we have that full report from all of our findings that took us a really long time to put together. And so it's a good read. It's a long read, but we'd encourage you guys to check it out. So thank you.
Woohoo! There's some really good podcasts on there, so it's worth checking out.